Bang! Right when everyone thought that Xianxia was about to be killed, an enormous bang resounded out from within the enormous hand, and it shook the heavens and the earth, caused a rain of light to spray out explosively, and the surrounding space to boil. Moreover, the enormous hand started trembling violently. However, everyone noticed that Xianxia's expression within the world of flames in the palm was composed while his bloody sword struck out like waves as it slashed towards the surroundings. Sword strike after sword strike, surging without end, and it was actually on the verge of slashing apart the world of flames. Ignorant fool! Ignite the world and smelt it into a furnace! Xianxia wasn't panicked in the slightest as he shouted out loudly, and the world of flames within his palm instantly underwent a tremendous change. Scorching flames surged and actually converged into a furnace within his palm, and it caused the glow of flames to shook into the sky as it started to refine Xianxia. The expressions of everyone revealed shock because that furnace was obviously a terrifying magic treasure. Now, it was actually fused with Xianxia's Dao art, causing its might to rise explosively by a great deal. Such ability had simply attained the level of utilizing it based on one's own will and without any rules. It was capable of transforming anything into a Dao art, and it was horrifying. The sky trembled as space was burned by the high temperature to the point of warping. A bronze furnace that was inscribed with the pattern of stars, moon, sun, plants, insects, fish, and the act of the ancestors offering sacrifices to the gods appeared. It was mysterious and heavy, and the glow of flames shot out violently within it as it refined Xianxia. Open! An explosive shout that shook the heavens and the earth resounded out as everyone heard a rumbling clang that was deafening. The entire furnace started shaking violently before being unable to withstand this force in the end, and it was blasted flying with a bang. Surging lava gushed out from the mouth of the furnace and poured all over the ground, and it incinerated large and horrifying holes on the ground. You do have slight ability. Xianxia waved his hand and kept the furnace away. On the other hand, Xianxia's imposing aura was like a dragon as he stood upright with the bloody sword in his hand, and his clothes fluttered with the wind. Merely based on his outward appearance, he'd actually not suffered any injury within the world of flames earlier. Everyone exclaimed with admiration, "This fellow Xianxia really is a freak, and he can't be judged based on logic." If it was any other person, that person would have probably been completely annihilated and refined by Xianxia a long time ago. Meanwhile, Xianxia had already taken the initiative to launch an attack. His face was calm and expressionless, and his entire body was coiled with numerous dazzling and resplendent divine rings formed from grand Tao profundities. Bang! 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 He moved with the chaotic 9 steps annihilation, causing killing intent to shoot out violently while the yin and yang in the surroundings were thrown into chaos. Moreover, the 5 elements were slices apart while boundless and pure killing intent transformed into seemingly material sharp blades that swept out as if they intended to mince apart the entire world. This phenomenon was extremely shocking. Every single footstep of his sounded like a god striking a war drum or like a myriad of fiend gods charging out from hell, and killing intent penetrated through the sky and through the surroundings into chaos. A flaming glow shot out as Xianxia's eyes opened and closed, and his hands fluttered about as he drew down the lightning in the 9 heavens to transform into numerous dazzling and sharp flaming bolts of lightning that slashed down. Firestar Divine Lightning! An exclaim of shock sounded out from nearby as someone had recognized that it was Firestar Divine Lightning, and it was something that only someone of extraordinary natural talent and possessed the Firestar body was capable of controlling. This lightning contained fire insight, yet carried the murderous intent of lightning, and it was ferocious and overbearing. It was the most raging and violent lightning, and its might was extraordinarily great. Rumble! The flames and lightning rumbled as they resisted the chaotic 9 steps annihilation and erupted with a blazing rain of light that caused the heavens and the earth to shake, the mountains to tremble, and even the rivers extremely far away were suffused with a chaotic aura. Xianxia's hands fluttered about repeatedly as he drew numerous bolts of Firestar Divine Lightning once again, and they gushed down like a storm and struck right towards Xianxia. Huff! Xianxia shouted lightly as his figure flashed, and he swung the bloody sword through the sky, causing a wave of rumbling and enormous bangs to be heard. In the sky, a myriad of bright silver lightning actually descended as well, and they were thick like the arm of an infant and seemed like the Milky Way in the 9 heavens was pouring down as they covered the heavens and the earth. Most astonishing of it all was that every single bolt of silver-colored lightning actually condensed into numerous silver lotuses. The glow of lightning surged within the petals while arcs of lightning flickered, and it emitted an exceedingly horrifying aura. That's the sacred lotus lightning technique. Many people were shocked. This was a renowned peak-grade Tao art of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, and it possessed an extraordinarily great might. During the primordial times, the 9 Radiant Sword sect has a saint that was skilled in the Tao of lightning, and he'd relied on this Tao art to annihilate countless formidable existences and shock the 3 dimensions. It was precisely because of this that he'd created a great reputation for himself, and it caused everyone in the world to know how terrifying this Tao art was. But everyone knew clearly that this peak-grade Tao art that shocked the primordial era had been lost in the annals of time, and they never imagined that Xianxia would have actually cultivated it successfully. Where did this fellow, Xianxia, come from? Why have I never heard that the 9 Radiant Sword sect had such a figure? The people in the distance spoke in light voices, and they were fairly shocked. If this kid doesn't die today, then he'll surely shock the world and shake the entire dark reverie, everyone exclaimed with admiration. Before this, he'd fought the crowd of geniuses by himself, and he dyed the clear sky red while sweeping through all obstacles. Now he'd matched Xianxia equally with shocking Tao arts that shook everyone present. How could such a figure be ordinary? Flaming lightning raged as silvery lightning transformed into lotuses, and they collided with each other as if a calamity had descended. It caused the entire world to be enveloped within surging lightning, and it was sufficient to cause every being in the world to be astounded and horrified. Very good. Only a battle like this is interesting. Xianxia didn't become infuriated, but started laughing instead when he saw that he was unable to do anything against Xianxia, and his battle intent blazed like flames as his gaze emanated bolts of lightning, while he locked onto the distant Xianxia. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the space between his brows and revealed a silver eye, and it shot out numerous silver beams of light that were like strands of fine and hazy silver threads. These threads were soft like mist, smooth like a stream of water, and dreamlike. Star River Silver Eyes. My God, this is another innate Tao art. It's the ultimate technique of the Desolate Spirit clan. Firestar Body, Star River Silver Eyes. This Xianxia actually possesses 2 types of innate talents, and he's practically capable of comparing to an inborn saint. Everyone was shocked as they'd recognized the origins of those silver-colored eyes, and the numerous silver beams of light that were shot out from within his eyes had a fantastic name, Star Soul Streaks. It seemed to be gentle and mysterious, yet it was the most horrifying beam of light in the hearts of everyone in the world. So long as one was affected by it, then no matter how high one's cultivation was or how formidable one's magic treasures were, the person would only be like a mosquito that was captured in a spider's web and would have their flesh, bones, veins, soul, and everything devoured gradually by the silver light. Such a terrifying innate ability hadn't even appeared within the Desolate Spirit clan for 10,000 years, and it had been lost in the annals of history since a long time ago. Yet now it had actually been grasped by Xianxia. But Xianxia wasn't afraid at all. A vertical eye similarly appeared between his brows and erupted with numerous lights of eradication. They were jet black like lightning as they penetrated the sky like bolts of lightning, and they emitted an icy cold and horrifying sheen as they eliminated all Xianxia's attacks. Divine ability, Eye of Divine Truth. The supreme divine ability in the legends that shocked the ages. The light of eradication is actually the light of eradication that's capable of eradicating all techniques in the word. My God, this isn't real, right? Everyone was shocked and felt their scalps go numb because the Tao arts and divine abilities possessed by the 2 of them were so numerous and so formidable that it caused them to feel dizzy and practically not dare believe that all of this was real. After all, every single ability they executed was capable of allowing anyone to roam the world freely. Yet now, so many Tao arts and divine abilities that shocked the world were grasped by the 2 of them, and this was simply sufficient to make anyone in the world go red with envy and sufficient to make any living being that boasted to be a genius to feel ashamed from its own inferiority. Rumble. No matter how shocked everyone was, the battle between Xianxia and Xianxia had already arrived at an exceedingly intense moment now, and they were like two suns that were engaged in battle with each other. They emitted explosive glows without end while rumbling resounded out, and it shook the surroundings and illuminated the world. This was absolutely a battle that was rare to come by, and in the entire dark reverie, a battle of this level was difficult to see in 1,000 years. Moreover, at the end, who amongst these two proud geniuses would win? Xianxia was the most renowned madman in the Heavenflow Dao sect. He yearned for battle insanely, and was peerlessly formidable, causing him to terrify everyone. But he'd found his match now. In the sky, various Dao arts that shook the heavens and the earth flew about while dazzling lights erupted explosively. Those two figures were like two WRMs that were coiled together as they surged about violently and fought valiantly. And they fought from the heavens to the earth before entering into the clouds. This battle seemed to already be capable of being called a peak battle in the Nether Transformation realm, and it alarmed everyone within the Dark Parasol secret realm. Swoosh! Swoosh! At an extremely far distance from the battlefield, the figure of a man and woman appeared abruptly. I never imagined that there are actually young men of such level amongst the natives of the three dimensions. The man raised his eyes and focused towards the distance while a wisp of a bloodthirsty and excited sheen suffused his eyes. His figure was extremely tall while his hair hung loosely behind his head. He wore a golden robe that was embroidered with numerous strange patterns that seemed like devils yet weren't devils, seemed like demons yet weren't demons, and it formed a terrifying, ghastly, and mysterious pattern. He was precisely that mysterious figure called Xianxia. Xiankue. If I refine both of them into blood soul pills, it'll probably taste wonderful, right? Xianxia stretched out his scarlet-red tongue and licked his lips while his eyes were filled with a ruthless and bloodthirsty expression. I've already utilized the Darklight Ice Sacrifice technique to deduce that the Creation Sword domain will emerge in less than 3 days, whereas the Creation Sword domain is one of the barriers that guards the door of profundity. If we want to enter it, then we must arrive at the Creation Sword domain extremely early. Otherwise, if those natives of the three dimensions beat us to it and seize that divine object, then we'll be unable to report the fulfillment of our assignment to the Lord. Xue Kuei frowned as she spoke. She was peerlessly beautiful and similarly wore a golden robe. Her slender and plump thighs were much longer than an ordinary woman, and it caused her to seem more slender, graceful, and beautiful. So, I advise you not to do that so as to avoid exposing our identities. Disappointing. Truly disappointing. Xianxia sighed deeply and was extremely disgruntled, but the ruthless and ghastly expression in his eyes grew even deeper. The dressing of those two fellows is so strange. Right at this moment, a group of cultivators flashed over from the distance, and all of them were stunned upon seeing Xianxia and Xiankue. A group of little natives dare to point at me and talk about me? Die! Xianxia's eyes surged with a bloody glow as he stretched out with his hand and grabbed, causing a wisp of a dazzling beam of light to stretch out and envelop down. Bang! 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 A wave of muffled bangs resounded out. Those cultivators hadn't even reacted to what had happened when they were directly blasted into balls of dense bloody mist, and they didn't even have the time to let out shrill cries. Swoosh! Xianxia stretched out his hand and grabbed once more, causing the mist of blood to swiftly condense into numerous berry-sized blood pills that descended into his hand before being swallowed by him in a single gulp. Nether Transformation Realm Blood Soul Pills. Unfortunately, the taste is slightly inferior, but it's better than nothing. Xianxia chewed as he let out a sigh of comfort. He had ghastly blood-red eyes and sharp teeth, and there was strands of blood flowing down from the corners of his mouth, causing him to seem extraordinarily terrifying. Let's go! Xiankue frowned and glanced at this bloodthirsty and perverted madman before turning around and leaving. I forgot to leave some for you to enjoy. Once the door of profundity emerges, I'll refine all the cultivators here into blood soul pills for you to enjoy. How about it? Xianxia shook his head and chuckled as he followed up. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already vanished without a trace. I never imagined that you actually be able to go against me for so long with 5 times combat strength, and you really are an exceptional figure. But the more it's like this, the more excited it makes me, because killing a genius provides a better sense of accomplishment than killing a pile of trash. Chun-Shi, am I right? In the sky, Yen Shursen roared into the sky as the glow of flames curled up from his entire body. He took a step forward in midair like a god of flames. He seemed extremely violent, and the stars, moon, and sun circulated in his hand as he charged at Chen-Shi. Everyone was shocked. Exactly how terrifying and overbearing is this ability of grasping the world in his hand and forming the sun, stars, and moon? Those numerous stars, sun, and moon surged with the glow of flames as they appeared in the sky, causing the heavens and the earth to be cast into a shade. It seemed like a starry sky that was a sea of flames. Bang! Space shattered. This palm strike of Yen Shursen's contained the heavens and the earth and formed stars. It was too terrifying and was like a tempestuous storm that swept through 5,000 kilometers in the surroundings with a might capable of obliterating everything. That might not necessarily be the case. The person that dies today might be you, Yen Shursen. Chen-Shi spoke with an extremely calm voice, and the wings of disruption flapped as he charged forward to meet Yen Shursen's attack. His attack didn't have any dazzling lights or stars that lay across the sky, but it possessed a terrifying, imposing aura that shook those stars, sun, and moon to the point of shattering one by one. And it was a terrifying scene that seemed like the obliteration of the universe. Shockingly, this was the obliteration Dao insight, but it was executed by Chen-Shi with a Dao art, causing its might to be even more terrifying, and it caused all the stars, moon, and sun Yen Shursen form to be blasted apart and obliterated. Chen-Shi swung his fist out ceaselessly as he moved straight ahead and went head-on against Yen Shursen. Even though he was lacking in 2 times combat strength when compared to Yen Shursen, his black hole world was even more solid and vast, and coupled with the assistance of the dark parasol sapling, the vital energy and true essence in his entire body was practically at a peak state at all times. So he was utterly unafraid when going head-on against Yen Shursen. Rumble. Various Dao arts shook the surroundings and were extremely terrifying as they caused blazing brilliance to envelope the land and drown the landscape. Such a terrifying scene shocked everyone in the surroundings to the point of retreating repeatedly, as they were deeply afraid of being affected because their lives would be in danger. Long Jinbei and Enwei were dazed by this scene, and their minds shook without end. Never had they imagined that Chen-Shi's combat strength had actually attained such a level. Earlier, he'd swept through all enemies as he fought the crowd of geniuses, and now he fought Yen Shursen equally. Such a strength was something that even they considered themselves to be inferior to. Swiftly deal with this person. I sensed the aura of xenorace experts from outside the 3 dimensions just a moment ago. Perhaps they've come for the sake of the chaotic divine crystal as well. Right when Chen-Shi was battling Yen Shursen fiercely, the voice of the tiny cauldron suddenly resounded out in his heart, and it instantly caused him to be shocked. Xenorace experts? He knew now that the 3 dimensions formed a whole of its own, and the defense of the extremely solid dimensional crystal walls in its surroundings had always been stopping the xenorace experts that were from outside the 3 dimensions from invading. Moreover, these xenorace experts from outside the 3 dimensions had been the enemies of every single living being in the 3 dimensions since ancient times, and they'd always wished for nothing more than to invade the 3 dimensions and take control of it. During the time he was at the primeval battlefield, Chen-Shi had once seen 4 peak xenorace experts that came from outside the 3 dimensions, and their strengths were absolutely terrifying. Even a heavenly immortal like Bing Shirtian wasn't a match for them, and if it wasn't for the tiny cauldron making a move at the critical moment, the entire primeval battlefield might have fallen into the hands of those xenorace experts. Now there were actually xenorace experts that had snuck into the dark reverie and arrived within the dark parasol secret realm, so how could this not shock Chen-Shi? Could it be the 3 dimensions are really about to undergo an upheaval? He'd once heard Madman Lu speak of it while he was in the 9 Radiant Sword sect. There was only less than 1,000 years remaining from the upheaval of the 3 dimensions. So the appearance of these xenorace experts at this moment was undoubtedly a type of sign, and it caused him to sense a slight feeling of impending disaster. As the saying goes, every time there's great chaos, there are surely heretics present. The appearance of these xenorace experts just happened to be like these heretics, and he had no choice but to be vigilant. Bang! Right during the time Xianxia's mind had zoned out slightly, and it wasn't even an instant, Xianxia had firmly grasped onto this opportunity and fiercely blasted Xianxia flying with a palm strike. Pooh! Xianxia spat blood as his figure staggered back and retreated without end. A single mistake caused a string of mistakes. Xianxia didn't let up after obtaining success, and his attacks were like a violent storm that locked tightly onto Xianxia without stopping. He had the oppressive and imposing aura of intending to achieve victory in one go. During this horrifying battle, the enormous mountain that was filled with the aura of earth transformed into an earthen yellow and enormous leaf amidst a wave of rumbling. Its striations and veins were clear like the brand of the Grand Tao, and it was coiled by boundless yellow and hazy strands of the aura of the Grand Tao of Earth. It was precisely the Grand Tao fragment concealed within the region of Earth. But everyone present couldn't care about all this now. All of them were watching the battle in the skies with astonishment and without blinking, as they were deeply afraid of missing any slight detail. Because they knew that the outcome of this battle between two great geniuses was about to be decided. Who would have the mood to care about anything else at this critical moment? Not to mention that so many experts were casting covetous gazes at the Grand Tao fragment that had emerged, so no one would dare to make a move at this moment, because if they were to become a target of all, then their lives would be at risk. Xianxi's in a precarious situation. As they looked at Xianxia, who was coughing up blood without end while being pursued repeatedly by Xianxia in the sky, the hearts of Long Jinbei and Enwei tightened instantly, and they were anxious, worried, perturbed, and uneasy. Why did it turn out like this? They were clearly well matched in strength earlier, so why has he instantly been pressured to the point of falling into a disadvantageous position? Both of them were unable to guess the reason, and it was precisely because of this that they felt even more worried for Xianxia. Xianxia had already spoken with certainty earlier that he wanted to annihilate Xianxia this time. In other words, once Xianxia lost, he would absolutely die without any chance of survival. Truthfully speaking, I'm slightly unable to bear killing an opponent like you. Unfortunately, you're an enemy of my Heavenflow Dao sect and overestimated your ability to the point of wishfully thinking of fighting for Ancestor Qing with Lord Bing Shirtian. I can only kill you now to remove any future troubles. Xianxia shouted explosively as his entire body surged with resolute killing intent, whereas his movements didn't slow down in the slightest as he carried seas of flames, enormous waves, stars, suns, and moons, as he slapped out repeatedly at Xianxia with the intention of annihilating Xianxia. Xianxia was shaken by these attacks to the point of coughing up blood again and again, but he didn't retreat. His fighting spirit hadn't weakened at all, and he still fought with all his strength and revealed shocking tenacity. You're like an ant trying to topple a giant tree. Struggling is futile. Xianxia's palm pressed down like a myriad of giant mountains pressing down, and they rumbled as they blasted Xianxia flying like a kite that had its string cut, causing a mouthful of blood to spray out from his mouth once again. Everyone was shocked and stared their eyes open even wider as they stared fixedly at the battlefield to the point they practically forgot to breathe. The curtains to this battle were about to be drawn, and life or death would occur in an instant. However, right at this moment, Xianxia suddenly noticed that Xianxia had suddenly started grinning in this extremely dangerous moment, and he very unexpectedly beckoned with his hand. This action seems to be slightly familiar? Swoosh! A wisp of earthen yellow flowing light tore through space as it flashed towards Xianxia that beckoned at it. Shockingly, it was the Grand Tao fragment that had the Grand Tao of Earth branded upon it. Fuck! No wonder it looked familiar. This fellow relied on this exact method to seize our Grand Tao fragment. The eyeballs of everyone almost fell out, and they were astounded to the extreme. Swoosh! Right when everyone was astounded, the Grand Tao fragment had already fallen into Xianxia's palm, and it instantly vanished without a trace. Humph! You clearly know you're gonna die for sure, so why bother? Do you think you're capable of instantly refining and absorbing a Grand Tao fragment to multiply your strength once more? Xianxia grunted coldly and seemed like a god of devils as flaming rays of light curled up as his eyes blinked, causing him to emanate an oppressive aura. Xianxia wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth and puckered his lips without saying anything. Within his body, he was circulating his black hole world madly, while relying on the might of the dark parasol sapling to start refining and absorbing this grand Tao fragment. Xianxia was really terrifyingly formidable, possessed extraordinary natural talent, and possessed numerous Tao arts and magic treasures that shook the heavens and the earth. Moreover, he possessed the ability to multiply his combat strength by 7 times. Amongst those of the same generation, it was practically impossible for him to find a match. When faced with a freak that was like an inborn saint, Xianxia knew extremely clearly that perhaps he was capable of throwing other nether transformation realm cultivators into disorder and defeating them with his 5 times combat strength, but when compared to Xianxia, he was obviously a bit inferior. After all, no matter if it was Tao arts, magic treasures, strength, and combat experience, Xianxia was already amongst the top ranks of those in the same generation, and it caused Xianxia to be unable to gain any advantage. Originally, he was able to rely on the might of the dark parasol sapling to let the fight drag on until Xianxia was exhausted and forcefully exhaust Xianxia to death. But, unfortunately, because of the tiny cauldron suddenly speaking a moment ago, it had caused a slight flaw to appear in his mind, and it was instantly grabbed by Xianxia without letting off, causing him to fall into a disadvantaged position right away. As the saying goes, one wrong move and the whole game could be lost. Under these adverse circumstances, he required a great breakthrough in order to turn the situation around, whereas that grand Tao fragment that had emerged into the world had become Xianxia's one and only choice. Give up. Even if the grand Tao fragment has fallen into your hands, it will still belong to me once I kill you in the end. You're just wasting your energy. Xianxia roared like a thunderclap that shook the surroundings, and it was filled with an arrogant and overbearing tone. Bang! In the next moment, he'd flashed out with his hand carried a myriad of flaming glows, and it was like a sea of flames descending from the sky. Such an attack was absolutely capable of obliterating a city and destroying countless armies, yet it was used to deal with a single person now. The expressions of everyone turned to shock as they'd sensed Xianxia's resolution to kill Xianxia from this strike, and it caused their bodies to tense up uncontrollably as they stared fixedly at the battle. His life is hanging by a thread. Will Xianxia be killed just like this? The hearts of Anwei and Long Jinbei had even risen to their throats as they revealed despaired and dejected expressions. If Xianxia were to die, then even if they were able to survive, they would be unable to be at ease for their entire lifetimes. Bang! An enormous bang that shook the heavens resounded out. It was like the sun and moon had collided, and it resounded out in the 9 heavens while surging with an extremely blazing glow that drowned out the entire sky and caused every single person to be unable to see the scene in the sky clearly. Has Xianxia died? Everyone stared their eyes wide open yet were utterly incapable of seeing everything clearly, and their eyes were pierced by the blazing rays of light to the point of aching and being on the verge of flowing with tears instead. He's probably dead. Even if he obtained that grand Tao fragment, it's impossible for Xianxia to turn the situation around in this critical situation of life and death. After all, it's absolutely impossible to completely refine and absorb a grand Tao fragment within an instant. Alas, actually when you think about it, if it wasn't for him repeatedly plundering our grand Tao fragments and incurred public indignation, it would be unlikely for such a genius figure to fall to such an end. Haha! Truly laughable. The grand Tao fragments were things without owners. So what crime has Xianxia committed? Unfortunately, this kid has been killed in the end. Everyone whispered in discussion with various different expressions. Some carried admiration, regret, pity, excitement, delight, and wished for nothing more than to dance with joy. All of these discussions weren't inferior to thunderclaps when they entered into the ears of Long Jinbei and Anwei, and it caused their expressions to turn gloomy, their eyes to lose color, their hearts to feel dejected and ache as if it was being minced apart, and they felt it was difficult to breathe. He's dead? Is he really dead? Bang! Right at this moment, a figure was suddenly blasted flying from within the light that covered the heavens and the earth, and it was captured in the fields of everyone's visions. However, Everyone seemed as if they were struck by lightning when they saw this figure, and they almost didn't dare believe their eyes. That figure was actually Xianxia. A strand of scarlet-red blood flowed out from the corners of his mouth, and even though it vanished instantly, it was still clearly noticed by everyone present in the surroundings. In other words, he'd actually be injured? This was the first time that Xianxia was injured since the battle began. Originally, everyone thought that Xianxia would die for sure, yet never had they imagined that such a turn in the situation would occur. Everyone was stupefied like wooden puppets and didn't understand exactly what had happened. But when they saw Xianxia's tall figure gradually appearing within the dispersing glow, they instantly knew that all their guesses from before were utterly wrong. Xianxia didn't die, and he'd injured Xianxia in this critical moment instead. The scene was in an uproar because they'd seen an enormous miracle occur right before their very eyes. He's alive! Haha! He's alive! I knew this fellow wasn't someone who would die young. Ha ha ha! It's good that he's alive, it's good that he's alive. Long Jinbei and Anwei were still in disbelief. But when they raised their heads and saw that familiar tall figure beneath the sky with their own two eyes, they were instantly stunned, and they almost wept from extreme joy and the rise and fall in their feelings. After all, since they'd started cultivating until now, they'd never lost their composure as they had at this moment. It was obvious from this that this scene had brought enormous pleasant surprise and joy to them. Very good. You were actually able to endure for so long before bringing forth your entire strength at this moment. Xianxia's eyes turned icy cold and flickered with surging flames, as he'd already become truly infuriated. He didn't think that Xianxia was capable of completely refining and absorbing the Grand Tao fragment in an instant, so he felt that Xianxia had always been concealing his strength since the beginning of the battle. Only by explaining it in this way would he be able to accept it. Again! Xianxia roared as his strength became even more tremendous, and his entire body burned while he held an ancient and heavy bronze cauldron in his hand before smashing it down at Xianxia. Xianxia avoided it. At this moment, his entire body emanated boundless radiance and was suffused with a terrifying aura that was more than 2 times more formidable than before, and he went head-on with Xianxia ferociously. At this moment, he'd relief on the might of the dark parasol sapling to instantly refine and absorb the Grand Tao fragment, and he'd already possessed the ability to multiply his combat strength by 6 times, causing his strength to be incomparable to before. Dong! It was like a fiend god had struck a drum of the gods as his hand slapped onto the bronze cauldron, and it struck the cauldron to the point its body actually sunk down. Exactly how enormous would the strength needed to accomplish this be? After all, this cauldron was a quasi-immortal artifact with peerless might, and it was called the Suncrow World Cauldron. It was a precious treasure that Xianxia had searched for bitterly, and it was far from something ordinary quasi-immortal artifacts could compare to. Yet now, it was actually struck to the point of sinking in by a single strike from Xianxia. This divine might couldn't help but shock everyone present, and even Xianxia himself was visibly moved. Very good. Very good. Xianxia roared repeatedly and seemed to be furious to the extreme. His eyes were crimson red and surging with the glow of flames, and he'd already gone completely mad, causing his peerless imposing manner to seem as if it belonged to a great god of demons while he charged towards Xianxia while coiled by divine flames. Xianxia remained silent and was composed. Every single action of his executed 1,000 skills and a myriad of profound techniques, and he was like a sovereign that had descended to the world to guide it and possessed boundless might. Just like this, both of them collided once again, and they carried out a most terrifying battle of life and death. It was like 2 savage, ferocious beasts from the primeval times had encountered each other and were fighting violently. They fought from the heavens right down to the ground, then from the region of Earth to the entire dark parasol secret realm before charging once more into the clouds, and then they fought all the way back to the region of Earth. This caused all the spectators of the battle to be dumbstruck by this scene, and they practically forgot everything because their eyes and hearts were filled with enormous shock and their minds were shaking endlessly. This was absolutely a battle that was peerless in their generation. A battle between unequaled geniuses, and it was bound to go down in history, shake the world, and cause the entire dark reverie to be shocked. On the other hand, Both Long Jinbei and Enwei knew that when Xianxia returned to the sect and with his natural talent, Xianxia would absolutely surpass all geniuses to be ranked at the peak of the seed disciples on Divine Radiance Peak. In the sky, both of them fought more and more violently, and they fought to the point the heavens and the earth were cast into a shade. The sun and moon dimmed down, and the corners of their mouths flowed with blood. In the end, Yan Shisan's killing move was obliterated, causing him to be slapped flying by Chen Shi, and it shook him to the point he coughed up blood without end as he flew out through the sky. Not to mention you. Even Bing Shirtian is unable to obstruct my footsteps. Chen Shi spoke with an icy cold voice. I refuse to accept this. Yan Shisan roared furiously as he stared, his eyes wide open with rage. Chen Shi made a move directly. This time, his expression was even more icy cold and murderous than before, and it was also much calmer. He slapped out with his palm, and it seemed like a myriad of enormous waves were surging out while emitting rumbling and whistling sounds. Amongst them was the vague scene of numerous mysterious and beautiful permitha flowers in full bloom, swaying and emitting a terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. That was the might of permitha, and it was capable of guiding souls through the afterlife. If one didn't obey, then one would surely be suppressed beneath the 6 paths of reincarnation and the 18 levels of hell. Yan Shisan bombarded it with all his might. His entire body was burning like a scorching sun while he himself was trying to dodge it, yet it was futile, and he was blasted flying by it. Pooh! A string of blood flew up into the air. The front of his clothes shattered apart while his chest sunk down, and numerous bones had been blasted apart. If it wasn't for his formidable strength and swift change to defense, all his internal organs would have been shattered by this attack. Bang! Yan Shisan fell towards the ground, and he suffered a heavy injury that caused him to lose his ability to do battle. The outcome was decided. At this moment, the entire world was perfectly silent to the point a falling needle could be heard, and it was silent for a very long time because it had actually ended like this, causing it to be difficult for many people to accept. Yan Shisan had lost. This madman that had roamed freely throughout the dark reverie for many years, commanded the winds and the clouds, and was practically unable to find a match amongst those of the same generation, was a figure that was so formidable and overbearing. Yet he'd actually been defeated. How could this not shock all of them? He was a genius of the Heavenflow Dao sect that possessed outstanding natural talent, yet had fallen to a miserable defeat now and completely lost the ability to do battle. How could all of them accept this? Even Long Jinbei and Enwei couldn't help but feel suffocated and were shocked to speechlessness when they saw a scene like this. After all, Yan Shisan's reputation was too great, and he was like the sun in the midday sky within the 10 great immortal sects. So his defeat naturally seemed to be too unbelievable. I never expected, haha. I truly never expected that I'd actually lose at your hands. But Chen Shi, you shouldn't get complacent too early because there are many more people that are much more formidable than I, Yan Shisan, amongst the experts of the same generation in the dark reverie. You're not the only one. Yan Shisan's clothes were dyed red with blood while his expression was pale, yet his bearing remained the same as he roared endlessly with laughter while facing the sky. As he spoke, he suddenly crushed a mysterious jade talisman within his hand, causing a ray of light to flash before his entire body actually vanished instantaneously, and it was even to the extent that it didn't even give rise to a spatial fluctuation. Yan Shisan roared with laughter as he instantly vanished without a trace, and it caused everyone present to be astounded to the extreme. On the other hand, Chen Shi was similarly surprised and bewildered because it didn't seem like teleportation, and it was utterly impossible for Yan Shisan to teleport with his current cultivation. Chen Shi searched the surroundings with the eye of divine truth, yet didn't notice any spatial fluctuation. That's a cosmic immortal talisman. My ancestor once possessed one, and only a great figure in the immortal dimension is capable of refining one. Once it's crushed, it's capable of moving through boundless space and attaining the effect of greater spatial teleportation. It's the best tool to protect one's life, because no one in the mortal dimension is capable of obstructing it. Someone exclaimed with shock when he recognized the method Yan Shisan had utilized to flee, and it caused everyone present in the surroundings to be exceedingly shocked in their hearts, because the value of such an immortal talisman was even greater than a quasi-immortal artifact. Xianxia couldn't help but shake his head, and he was slightly disgruntled because he never expected that Yen Shisan would be able to escape in the end. Especially those last words Yen Shisan spoke before he left. It caused Xianxia to feel slightly surprised because with Yen Shisan's attitude, he actually admitted that there were many people more formidable than himself. Could it be that it's an exalted nether transformation realm expert that has grasped 10 times combat strength? If it really is like this, then it would be too terrifying. After all, amongst the young nether transformation realm disciples in the 10 great immortal sects and the 6 lineages of the devil sects, disciples that possessed 5 times combat strength were already rather rare, and they were capable of being reputed as peak nether transformation realm experts. On the other hand, exalted nether transformation realm experts were simply a legend, and it was difficult for a single figure of such caliber to appear amidst 10 million people. Such a figure was extremely rare in the entire Dark Reverie, and it was difficult for one to appear in 1,000 years. Such a figure was absolutely a favorite of the heavens, a genius of the world. Once such a figure emerged into the world, the person would surely be an overlord that led a generation with extreme brilliance and be invincible amongst those of the same generation. For example, Yen Shisan possessed 7 times his combat strength and had already attained his current reputation. So it was obvious how shocking the appearance of an exalted nether transformation realm expert would be. But in next to no time, Xianxia stopped thinking about this matter because the world was so large that nothing was too strange in it. Perhaps there were really existences that were more extraordinary than Yen Shisan, but all of that wasn't related to him, so there was no point in thinking about it. Bang! 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 In the next moment, Xianxia's gaze had already moved down, and with a sweep of the eye of divine truth, he directly saw through the profundities of the 8 illusion immortal cage. Xianxia flicked his sleeve right away to break apart the formation, whereas those 8 quasi-immortal artifact flags fell into his hands. These 8 flags were thick like a child's arm, pitch black and icy cold, extremely heavy, and covered in a metallic and bloody color. Every single flag had a different pattern inscribed on it. There was a fiend god, spirit, the mortal world, sages that had attained the Tao. The 8 patterns practically encompassed the interrelationships between everything in the world. Xianxia acutely noticed that these 8 flags had a myriad of profound and complicated inscriptions refined on them, and when they were utilized together, their might was comparable to an immortal artifact, causing their value to be priceless. Even though Yen Shisan has fled, I didn't do all this for nothing in the end. Xianxia eliminated the brand on the flags with a raise of his hand, and then he refined them slightly before putting them away. This was a set of a formidable magic treasure, and it could be utilized for both protecting one's abode and to annihilate one's enemies. Its might was extraordinarily great, and it possessed boundless miraculous effects. At this moment, Long Jinbei and Enwei had already approached him, and their expressions were both extremely excited. The gazes they shot at Xianxia carried a wisp of admiration, but it was mostly a moved expression. Xianxia had fought the crowd of experts and gone against Yen Shisan all for the sake of rescuing the 2 of them. Now that they were finally rescued, it wasn't inferior to obtaining new life. So how could they not feel sincere gratitude towards Xianxia? Both of them opened their mouths and intended to say something, yet Xianxia shook his head and smiled as he stopped them. Let's leave first before we speak. As he spoke, Xianxia flicked his sleeve and brought the 2 of them along as he left, and from the beginning until the end, he didn't spare another glance at the other people present at the scene. Besides looking at each other, everyone present couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief in their hearts upon Xianxia's departure. Because they'd laid in ambush here with the intention of going against Xianxia earlier, they couldn't help but be slightly worried that they would suffer Xianxia's revenge. Now it would seem like they'd obviously thought too much, and Xianxia didn't take them seriously at all. In next to no time, the silence in the surrounding atmosphere was broken, and it was seething with excitement and clamor. All of them were animatedly discussing how the battle between Xianxia and Yen Shisan was too shocking. Even though the battle didn't last for long, it had ended with such an outcome, and it caused many people to be unable to calm their hearts. All of them knew clearly that Xianxia's name was bound to become a storm after this battle here today, and this storm would sweep through the world, shock the Dark Reverie, and become the hottest topic of discussion. Swoosh! A stream tore through the sky and flashed past the boundless earth. The dark parasol's secret realm was extremely large, yet was only a part of the dark parasol's abyss, and the other areas were even vaster and more mysterious. I have something to do, so I'm probably unable to go along with the both of you. She spoke apologetically on the way. Earlier, the tiny cauldron had spoken once more, and it said that the chaotic divine crystal would emerge into the world in the next 3 days. So he had to rush towards his destination and help the tiny cauldron obtain this divine object. Moreover, this process concerned the xenorace experts from outside the 3 dimensions as well. So he couldn't bear to bring Long Jinbei and Wei along so as to avoid any mishap from occurring and implicating them. Where are you going? The creation sword domain or the door of profundity? Long Jinbei asked with surprise. An extremely dangerous place. She could only give such an answer. Long Jinbei and Wei looked at each other, and both of them were extremely shocked in their hearts. Presently, after the battle with Xianxia, she had already proven exactly how formidable his strength was, and it caused them to feel that they were inferior to him. Even he says that place is dangerous, so exactly what sort of dangerous place is it? All right, we'll stay in the dark parasol secret realm and continue searching for Grand Dao fragments while waiting for you to return. After going silent for a short moment, Wei made a decision. Everyone had their own secrets, so since she has spoke like this, he'd surely made sufficient preparations already, and they could only respect his decision and be unable to interfere. Oh, there are still more Grand Dao fragments within the dark parasol secret realm? She was surprised. How could there possibly be no more? Even though you've swept away so many, there are still many hidden in other places. They're just even more deeply concealed. Long Jinbei looked at Shi with a strange gaze because he felt both admiration and amused when Grand Dao fragments were mentioned. A single person had swept away 6 Grand Dao fragments and angered all the experts to the point of stamping with rage and being on the verge of insanity. Such a ferocious deed was something only someone with Shi's strength could do. Good, haha. I thought it has been plundered completely by me. Shi rubbed his nose and laughed without end. Wei puckered her red lips and chuckled lightly as well when she heard this. Her beautiful hair hung loosely on her shoulders. Her figure was slender and graceful, her skin pure white and tender, and her bearing was gorgeous and ethereal, causing every expression of hers to emanate shocking beauty. Set out quickly. I've already sensed its exact direction. The tiny cauldron suddenly sent Shi a voice transmission and reminded him. Senior sister and senior brother Long. There's no time to lose. Junior brother will bid his farewells first. Shi was shocked in his heart and cupped his hands towards the 2 of them. Go ahead, junior brother Chen. Take care of yourself. Take care. Long Jinbei and Wei cupped their hands as they spoke solemnly. Shi nodded before turning around and transforming into a ray of light that sailed off, and he vanished instantly without a trace. The dark parasol's abyss was extremely huge, and it was covered in a lustrous and dazzling landscape. The slightest carelessness while moving within it might cause one to get lost and be unable to find one's way. Unless one possessed an extraordinary treasure or had knowledge of the dark parasol's abyss, one would utterly not dare to move about randomly in here because the entire dark parasol's abyss was filled with mysterious and unfathomable places. It was filled with great dangers and the risk of getting lost, and it really wouldn't be worth it to move about randomly and lose one's life in the process. But she had the tiny cauldron to lead the way, so he wasn't worried about going on the wrong path. Swoosh! The wings of disruption flapped as she left the dark parasol's secret realm like a flowing ray of light, and then he repeatedly changed direction and passed through numerous expanses of strange and unfathomable places. He turned here and there as if he'd fallen into a large-scale maze. If it wasn't for the tiny cauldron's guidance, he would have almost thought he'd gone the wrong way. Senior, where exactly is the chaotic divine crystal kept? She couldn't refrain from asking. According to what you said, it's probably behind the creation sword domain and within the door of profundity. The tiny cauldron didn't continue keeping silent, and it seemed to be awake at all times since it sensed the aura of those xeno-race experts. The door of profundity? Xianxia was shocked in his heart, as he never expected such a mysterious place of legend to actually really exist. According to rumor, there's a shocking secret treasure kept within there. It wouldn't be the chaotic divine crystal, right? Most shocking of it all was that according to what the tiny cauldron said, the door of profundity wasn't uncertain and difficult to find. Shockingly, it was just behind the creation sword domain. He knew extremely clearly that if another were to find out about this information, then it would surely cause a great stir. After an entire hour, an ocean suddenly appeared within Xianxia's field of vision. To his astonishment, this ocean was actually floating in midair, and it was entirely a world of water. Xianxia couldn't help but exclaim with admiration in his heart when he saw this scene. This is like a great figure with extraordinary ability had placed a vast ocean into the sky. Watch out! This is the water from the nether spring of the universe. Once one is tainted by it in the slightest, one's consciousness would be corroded while one's flesh and bones would be devoured, causing one to transform into a soul that lacked a consciousness. The tiny cauldron warned. Water from the nether springs? Xianxia was stunned, and he sensed the water carefully. Sure enough, he noticed that the ocean emitted the unique aura of the netherworld that was bone-piercingly cold and unusual. After that, a wisp of a faint smile couldn't help but suffuse the corners of his mouth. The water from the nether springs? I've grasped the Permitha and Oblivion Grand Dao insights that are supreme Dao insights in the netherworld. This water from the nether springs is probably utterly incapable of harming me in the slightest. Swoosh! Swoosh! Right at this moment, two figures suddenly flashed over from the distance, and they quickly arrived here. These two figures were tall and short, fat and thin. Obviously, they were from the same sect because they were dressed similarly, and their auras were rather strong. Both of them were slightly stunned when they saw Xianxia standing alone before the ocean of nether spring water, and they revealed vigilant expressions. Xianxia rubbed his nose as he turned around. He understood that so long as it was unfamiliar people that encountered each other in the dark parasol's abyss, it was possible for fierce competition to arise. It was even to the extent that there was no lack of cruel and vicious figures amongst the experts that had come to the dark parasol's abyss this time. These people didn't go to explore the secret realms but intended to reap the gains of others, and they stayed in the shadows while launching sneak attacks, surprise attacks, and plundering the gains of others. They were despicable and ruthless to the extreme. When they saw Xianxia turn around and didn't reveal any hostility, both of their expressions eased up. The thin one amongst them briefly sized up the ocean that lay across the sky before them and couldn't refrain from saying in a low voice, "The Nether Spring Ocean. It really is this place. We only have to go past this ocean and we'll be able to arrive at the creation." The fatty at the other side coughed dryly and interrupted. "It's good that you know, so cut the crap and let's go." After that, both of them soared into the sky and flashed towards the Nether Spring Ocean, and they quickly vanished without a trace. Senior, the creation sword domain wouldn't be at the other side of the Nether Spring Ocean, right? Xianxia's hearing was extremely acute, and he instantly captured the conversation between the two, causing him to ask the tiny cauldron with surprise. "Exactly," replied the tiny cauldron. "Looks like there are already many people that have headed over there." Xianxia muttered for a short while, and then he didn't hesitate any longer to flash out towards the Nether Spring Ocean. Swish! On the way, Xianxia felt bored, so he stretched out his hand and grabbed. Instantly, a force blasted onto the boundless ocean in midair, and it forcefully grabbed up a ball of Nether Spring water. How heavy! As soon as he grabbed it in his hand, Xianxia felt his arm become heave, causing him to let go completely. Merely a drop from that ball of nether spring water was no less than a few tens of thousands of kilograms in weight. Moreover, once he grabbed it, it started to corrode his flesh and skin. But he was prepared since the beginning, and he circulated the Permitha Dao insight and instantly subdued the ball of nether spring water. However, there was a problem with taking possession of it. The nether spring water was too overbearing, causing ordinary containers to be utterly incapable of containing it without being corroded. Even a quasi-immortal artifact storage magic treasure would be corroded to the point its quality was damaged after some time. Nether spring water can be utilized to refine medicinal pills, and it's a top sacred water in the world. It's capable of cleansing the impurities of medicinal pills and greatly increase the quality of medicinal pills. Since the ancient times, many great figures utilized it to refine medicinal pills. The tiny cauldron guided. I'll pass on a minor confinement technique to you, and it's capable of sealing up the nether spring water. You can keep a bit more for future use. After all, besides the netherworld, nether spring water can only be found in this dark parasol's abyss. Xianxia was shocked in his heart because he never imagined that the nether spring water would possess such a miraculous effect, and he never expected even more than the tiny cauldron would actually unprecedentedly take the initiative to pass on a technique to him. It was simply too shocking to him. This technique is called cage etching, and it means to etch an area that would serve as a prison. Listen well. In next to no time, the tiny cauldron had finished passing down this profound technique and gave Xianxia some pointers, causing him to instantly understand its profundities and exclaim endlessly with admiration in his heart. This cage etching technique wasn't just a minor confinement technique like the tiny cauldron has said, and it was simply capable of comparing to a peak-grade Tao art. It was profound and unfathomable, and capable of sealing and confining everything in the world. Moreover, it didn't injure the target, causing it to be extremely formidable even when used against enemies. Unlike the grand confinement Tao art and light of eradication, cage etching mostly related to sealing, and when it was cultivated to the extreme, it was even capable of sealing the changes of time and space. Swish! In next to no time, Xianxia had already made a move. His hands fluttered about as he struck out repeatedly to grab expanse after expanse of nether spring water, and then he utilized the cage etching technique to seal it before tossing it into the Buddha's pagoda. Just like this, he flew forward as he gathered, and in a short time of 10 minutes, he'd gathered an entire river of nether spring water that was immeasurable. We've arrived, the tiny cauldron reminded abruptly. Xianxia was stunned and instantly stopped what he was doing before raising his eyes to look over. He saw that there was an enormous black hole floating in the sky above the end of the nether spring ocean. The black hole seemed extremely out of place as it floated in midair. It was deep, pitch black, and suffused with a horrifying sheen, and it seemed like a door that led to the mysterious unknown. Is that the door that leads to the creation sword domain? Xianxia's spirits were refreshed as a wisp of anticipation couldn't help but arise in his heart. According to his knowledge, the inheritance of an exalted expert was hidden within here, and from the ancient times until now, countless great figures of the three dimensions had been drawn over to search for it. Unfortunately, not a single person had obtained the inheritance within it to date, and this caused this place to become even more mysterious and filled with the color of myth and legend. Xianxia really wanted to know if the inheritance that was capable of moving the hearts of the great figures in the three dimensions really existed, and if it existed, then how shocking would it be? But right when he intended to stride into the pitch-black door, he suddenly noticed something, and his gaze was like lightning as it swiftly shot towards the space at the side. A black hole floated in midair at the end of the nether spring ocean. It was deep, pitch-black, and suffused with a horrifying sheen, and it seemed like a door that led to the mysterious unknown. According to Xianxia's guess, the black hole was probably the door that led to the creation sword domain. However, he didn't move instead, and his gaze shot towards the sky at the side as he seemed to have noticed something. This place was completely silent, yet because it was silent it seemed to be unusual instead. Along with Xianxia's gaze sweeping out, he instantly understood why this place would be unusual. Because there was actually group after group of figures lying in ambush within the sky in an area of 500 kilometers around the black hole. Those figures formed groups of 3 to 5 and ought to belong to different power, and they were scattered at different positions while using some sort of secret technique to actually be able to conceal themselves within space, causing their figures to be completely hidden out of sight. They were like venomous snakes that were concealed in the shadows, hidden from the eye of others, and it caused them to be difficult to be noticed by others. It was even to the extent that it was impossible to notice them with divine sense. If it wasn't for Xianxia possessing the eye of divine truth that was capable of seeing true reality and to see through the truth behind something, Xianxia would have almost been deceived. But all of them had been completely exposed down to the slightest detail before his eyes, and he instantly noticed that there were 78 people that belonged to 13 powers lying in ambush in the surroundings. Moreover, he even clearly saw that when the gazes of these people descended onto him, all of them revealed imperceptible traces of excitement and cruelty. They seemed like a group of wild beasts that had set their sights on a lamb that had fallen into a trap. Looks like these fellows are all akin to bandits. Lying in ambush in the surroundings of the entrance to the Creation Sword domain is indeed a superb location to rob and kill. If an ordinary person comes over, the person would probably become dizzy from the pleasant surprise of discovering the Creation Sword domain. So how could the person possibly notice the layer upon layer of killing intent lying in ambush in the surroundings? An imperceptible wisp of a cold expression suffused the corners of Xianxia's mouth as he guessed the purpose these people were lying in ambush here. Swoosh! Right at this moment, a cold and swift sword light suddenly pierced out from behind him, and it seemed as if it had appeared from thin air. It was cunning and sinister, and it struck directly towards his heart from behind. At practically the exact same moment, a few more figures leaped out at the same time from the sky on the other side, and they assaulted Xianxia from different angles. Their movements were extraordinarily swift, and their attacks were swift and mighty like lightning. Obviously, they intended to kill Xianxia with one strike. In an instant, the entire surroundings were covered in piercingly cold and terrifying killing intent, and it was like a heaven-encompassing net that completely locked down all Xianxia's paths of retreat. If it was anyone else here at this moment, the person would probably be shocked to the point of being dazed when facing this sudden scene, and the person could only wait helplessly for death to arrive. In the end, the person would be tortured and killed before the treasures in the person's possession would be completely plundered. This group of experts were extremely formidable because it was impossible for weaklings to arrive here. Unfortunately, they'd chosen the wrong target and had actually targeted Xianxia, so they deserved to suffer calamity. Even the peerless genius Xianxia wasn't a match for him, let alone them. Fuck off! Xianxia hadn't moved yet. A terrifying aura surged out explosively from him, and his voice sounded like spring thunder as he spat out two words. He'd already included the profundities of the Slaughter Dao insight within this shout, causing its might to be extraordinary. Rumble! It was like a hurricane that rumbled as it stretched out with Xianxia at the center, and it directly collapsed, crushed, and swept away the attacks that came from all directions, whereas those assailants seemed as if they were struck by lightning. All of their bodies shook violently as the bones and meridians in their entire bodies were shattered, and then blood sprayed from both their mouths and nose as they fell lifelessly into the Nether Spring Ocean. The water from the Nether Springs was exceedingly overbearing. No matter how formidable one's cultivation was, merely being tainted by a single drop would cause one's consciousness to be corroded while one's flesh and bones were melted, causing one to transform into a spirit that lacked a consciousness. These assailants had just fallen into the Nether Spring Ocean when they instantly emitted exceedingly shrill and miserable cries. After a short moment, they were completely swallowed by the Nether Spring water to the point not even scraps remained, and it was an extremely horrifying sight. All the other people concealed within space itself gasped when they saw this scene, and their entire bodies went cold. They instantly knew that this young man that had come here alone was a formidable figure that absolutely couldn't be offended, because his strength was terrifying to the extreme. Swoosh! After he killed these ignorant fools, Xianxia seemed as if he'd done an extremely normal thing and dusted his clothes before sweeping the surroundings with his gaze. And then he didn't hesitate any longer to unfold the wings of disruption and flash towards the black hole that floated in midair. In the blink of an eye, he'd vanished without a trace. On the other hand, all the groups of experts hidden in space looked at each other. Especially that icy cold gaze that Xianxia shot at them before leaving. It still caused them to be extremely terrified even at this moment. What sort of gaze was that? Icy cold like a blade. It penetrated right down to the heart. And it seemed like the gaze of a god that was looking down at an ant and was filled with dignity that couldn't be provoked. Who's that fellow? Why would there be such a formidable figure in the world? They were unable to guess the answer, and it was precisely because of their inability that it caused them to feel horrified. Fortunately, Xianxia had already left, and it allowed them to be slightly at ease. Just like the changing of position of the stars, as soon as Xianxia entered the black hole, his entire body was involuntarily led by an enormous force, causing scenery to flash before his eyes and seem as if he was penetrating through layer upon layer of time and space. Before he could recover from his shock, in the next moment, he'd arrived at a strange area. A sky that was thick like blood, a ground that was crimson red as if it was soaked with boundless scarlet red flesh blood. This vast, boundless, and desolate area was covered in the color of blood. It was like the blood of the gods had been sprayed all over the ground. It was like a horrifying ancient battlefield, and the air was suffused with a bloody aura that caused one's mind to become restless. The slightest weakness of the will might cause one's inner demons to be drawn out by the bloody aura, causing one to lose control of one's emotions and transform into a bloodthirsty and insane madman. It was even to the extent that one might experience chi deviation and have one's foundation destroyed. This is the creation sword domain. Xianxia circulated his cultivation to maintain the clarity of his mind and Tao heart as he sized up the surroundings. In next to no time, he noticed that the extremely distance was actually filled with exceedingly chaotic fluctuations of battle. There seemed to be a great battle being carried out over there. Swoosh! In the next moment, he'd already transformed into a flowing ray of light that flashed towards the source of the fluctuations of battle. Kill! Violent sounds of battle shot into the sky and shook the wind and the clouds, and it was like the shouts of fiend gods. Kill! Numerous terrifying Tao arts mixed with magic treasures of various colors soared through the heavens and the earth while erupting with blazing and dazzling glows that illuminated the world. Kill! Numerous figures moved about in the heavens and the earth. There were cultivators from the immortal sex, devil sex, and even the clans from the primordial era, and all of them were pressing forward with all their might. The scene before him seemed like an exceedingly violent battlefield. Fresh blood sprayed out violently, magic treasures soared about, and terrifying Tao arts rumbled in the heavens and the earth while emanating boundless light. This was the scene Xianxia saw when he rushed over, and as he sensed the horrifying aura that assaulted his face, he couldn't help but feel apprehensive in his heart while the nerves in his entire body tensed up involuntarily. Ants! What terrifying ants! Xianxia's eyes focused instantly when he saw what those cultivators were fighting against, and he felt a wisp of shock. Those numerous ants in the battlefield that were like ancient bronze statues had crimson red eyes and were over 30 m long. Their 4 limbs were strong, powerful, and suffused with a metallic and icy cold sheen. Every single time their feet descended, it would shatter apart the ground like a mountain was moving, and they possessed terrifying strength. Most shocking of it all was these bronze ants had actually mastered numerous formidable sword insights. They fought valiantly with sword chi that charged into the sky and was ghastly and fierce to the extreme. They seemed capable of cutting space apart into pieces and slashing the Milky Way into half. The circumstances seemed as if they transformed into numerous peerless sword cultivators as they fought those cultivators, and they were ferocious, overbearing, fearless, and terrifying to the extreme. What sort of existences are these? Primeval divine ants? Xianxia noticed with a single glance that every single one of these bronze ants possessed the strength of a first-rate nether transformation realm cultivation. Moreover, the sword insight they'd mastered were different from one other, yet were exceedingly formidable and fierce. If it was only 1 or 2, then it would naturally be much easier to deal with. But the scene before his eyes was one where the bronze ants were scattered about densely, and they covered the heavens and the earth. When looked at from far, it seemed as if the end of them couldn't be seen, and it caused one's scalp to go numb. Even if an earthly immortal realm expert were to enter a battlefield with so many bronze ants, the earthly immortal realm might not even be able to annihilate them before falling to exhaustion and might even be exhausted to death. The scene before his eyes was just like this. There was an entire few hundred cultivators and beings from the clans of the primordial era. But before this army of bronze ants, they were like a splash in an ocean and extremely inconspicuous. Moreover, there were people perishing miserably without leaving a corpse behind at every moment, and it was horrifying and bloody to the extreme. But even then, not a single person retreated, and they exerted all their strength to charge forward instead. It seemed as if there was something ahead that was drawing their attention, causing them to be unable to refuse, and they fought repeatedly as if they'd gone mad too, and they even disregarded their lives. These are primeval god devourer ants. During the primeval times, they moved about in large numbers and had once ruled over a terrifying period of time. Every single one of them is capable of destroying a mountain and possesses boundless strength. Moreover, they once devoured a real god, causing them to possess a monstrous reputation. The tiny cauldron reminded abruptly, "You have to be careful. This expanse of the heavens and the earth is filled with the bloody baleful chi formed from the fall of gods and devils. Once you enter battle, it's extremely easy for your mind to be blinded by this bloody baleful chi, causing you to lose your cool before being completely reduced to a madman that only knows how to fight." She came to a sudden understanding and was shocking in his heart. No wonder those cultivators are fighting so madly and even disregarded their lives. Their minds have probably been seized by that bloody baleful chi, causing them to enter an insane state. "Let's go. After we pass through this area, the divine palace of creation is not far ahead, and the door of profundity is behind the divine palace," said the tiny cauldron. "Air." She looked at the army of bronze ants that covered the surroundings, and he couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. Even though he possessed the dark parasol sapling and didn't have to worry about his true essence drying up. But what if the bloody baleful chi caused him to lose his mind? That would be troublesome. Don't forget that this is the dark parasol's abyss, and it was formed from the dark parasol divine tree. You possess a strand of the dark parasol divine tree's soul in your body, and being here is no different than returning to your own territory. Those primeval god-devourer ants wouldn't dare make things difficult for you. The tiny cauldron seemed to have seen through Xianxia's worries and reminded. So it turns out that the dark parasol sapling also has such a miraculous effect. Xianxia's spirits were instantly refreshed when he heard this, and all his worries were wiped away. He flashed out right away towards the army of bronze ants. But for safety's sake, he still circulated his black hole world to emit a strand of the aura of the dark parasol sapling and wrapped it around his body before he felt much more at ease. In this space that was suffused with the aura of blood, battles surged all around, and it was horrifying like purgatory. Numerous experts had lost their minds to the bloody baleful chi and had fallen into an insane state, and they were fighting with all their might within the vast army of bronze ants. There were people that perished from time to time, and the scene was horrifying and bloody. There were also some experts that hadn't stepped foot into the battlefield, and they avoided it from far away in the surroundings. They were looking for an opportune moment to make a move because they'd similarly discerned that if they were to charge over rashly, then they would surely share the same fate of those that had entered the battlefield before them and fall to their doom. They were waiting bitterly for an opportunity. Unfortunately, the army of bronze ants that covered the heavens and the earth and the bloody baleful chi that suffused the entire world was an extreme headache that they didn't know how to overcome. Swoosh! It was at this moment that a flowing ray of light suddenly tore through the sky and charged towards the army of bronze ants, and it seemed to be especially striking within this chaotic and horrifying battlefield. There's actually someone charging over? Idiot! He's even giving up his life for the sake of arriving at the divine palace of creation. His mind has really been befuddled, and he's overestimating his ability. Haha! How many idiots like this have there been today? Let me see how this fellow dies a miserable death. All those experts in the surroundings were slightly stunned when they saw this scene, and then they revealed a wisp of pity. This is another fellow that's about to give his life away. After all, they'd been waiting here for a long time and had always been searching for a superb opportunity because they intended to wait for the opportune moment to take action, as they didn't dare play around with their lives. During this process, they'd seen countless experts being unable to restrain themselves from charging out, and there was no lack of peak nether transformation realm experts amongst them. But in the end, all of them were like moths that darted to the flame, and they died miserably within the army of bronze ants. Not a single one survived. So when they saw this streak of light appear, as far as they were concerned, it was another idiot that was going to give his life away. That's... Suddenly, someone spoke out with surprise and bewilderment, and he revealed an expression of disbelief. Everyone else that was laughing coldly raised their eyes to look over, and their expressions instantly froze while their bodies seemed to have become clay puppets when they saw the distant scene clearly. They seemed as if they'd seen a ghost. Within their fields of vision, At the instant that streak of light charged into the chaotic battlefield, the dense army of bronze ants actually split apart and moved towards the side, and they opened an empty passageway. Those terrifying divine ants whose ancestors had once devoured gods simply seemed as if they were respectfully greeting the arrival of a king, and they were extraordinarily meek and didn't seem ferocious at all. It was too strange. Who would have imagined that a fellow that everyone thought would die for sure would actually be capable enough to accomplish this? Even the primeval god-devourer ants had moved aside successively and didn't dare obstruct his path at all, and it was simply like a miracle was occurring. Everyone was shocked as they knew they'd misjudged earlier. This wasn't a moth that was darting into the flames. This was obviously a dragon returning to its lair unobstructed. Swoosh! Swoosh! Someone noticed a slight opportunity in this and flew out in pursuit of that streak with the intention of following behind the streak and avoiding the assault of the bronze ants. Fuck! Why didn't I think of doing that? Everyone, charge! Follow up to them. Quickly! Quickly! An unforeseen event might occur if you hesitate. The others were unable to restrain themselves as well when they saw this because they knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Once they lost it, they would probably be unable to arrive at the divine palace of creation any longer. However, before they could even make a move, a string of shrill and miserable cries resounded out. Those experts that were the first to charge out hadn't even chased up to Xianxia's footsteps when they were drowned by the army of bronze ants, and they were instantly transformed into nothingness and vanished without a trace. Hiss! Everyone stopped moving as soon as they saw this scene, and they gasped repeatedly and felt extremely astounded. Never had they imagined that those damnable ants actually seemed as if they could recognize people. They were extremely meek and respected that streak of light as if it was a god. Yet once all of them made an appearance, those ants instantly changed completely into their ferocious and ruthless selves, and the ants assaulted them as if they'd killed the parents of the ants. After they understood this, besides feeling astounded, everyone felt extremely vexed and dejected. If we were able to strike up a relationship with that person before this and rely on his strength, then wouldn't we have been able to easily avoid these damnable ants? That streak of light was naturally Xianxia. He'd utterly never imagined that the scene of him charging into the army of bronze ants would actually draw out such thoughts from the hearts of all those experts in the surroundings. After he found out the army of ants was of no threat to him, he'd instantly relaxed and flew with extreme speed, and he flew for the time for an entire half of an incense stick to burn before the scene before his eyes changed instantaneously. The vast army of bronze ants had vanished and were replaced by a palace. The palace was grand, ancient, and seemed to have been standing in the heavens and the earth for countless years, and it emitted a desolate, heavy, and ancient aura. This palace seemed to have been constructed from ancient wood, and its entire body was suffused with expanses of striations and veins that seemed like the rings of an ancient tree, causing it to give others a strange feeling of profoundness and mysteriousness. It was self-evident that this was surely the most mysterious location in the creation sword domain, the divine palace of creation. According to rumor, the mantle and inheritance of that exalted expert from the primeval times was left within the divine palace of creation, and during the countless years until now, it had drawn innumerable great figures to come search for it. Unfortunately, not a single person had obtained the inheritance until now, and it caused this place to seem even more mysterious. Many people were guessing exactly what sort of figure would be able to obtain the inheritance. This question had accompanied this palace for countless years, until now yet no one was capable of giving a clear and definite answer to it. At this moment, the door to this palace was sealed tightly, and there were actually many people standing outside its doors. Xianxia couldn't help but feel a wave of surprise because he was clearly aware of exactly how enormous the size of the bronze ant army all along the way was. It was simply like an ocean, and he'd relied on the strand of aura of the dark parasol sapling to arrive here safely. Yet now, there were actually others that had passed through the vast army of bronze ants since a long time ago and had arrived here. So how could this not be shocking? Looks like I'm not the only one who has something to rely on, and those that are capable of arriving here probably have their own secret techniques. Xianxia seemed to be lost in thought. After all, if they were to go head-on against the bronze ants, then even an earthly immortal realm expert would probably be trapped to death within the army. However, these people were actually able to arrive here beforehand, so they were surely of extraordinary origin. The facts were really as Xianxia had inferred. When he arrived before the palace and saw the appearances of these people clearly, he was instantly enlightened in his heart. There were around 40 or 50 experts before the palace. There were beings from the immortal sects, devil sects, and clans from the primordial era. All of them were distributed into various different powers and left each other alone, yet faintly formed a confrontational situation. Obviously, the reason they were able to get along peacefully with each other earlier was that the door to the divine palace of creation hadn't opened yet. Otherwise, it would absolutely be impossible for such a scene to appear. Shockingly, Xianxia saw the figures of the Truth Embrace sect's Taoist Crimson Sun, the Heaven Flow Tao sect's Leng Chaner, the Heart Control Sword House when Tao ran, and many others amongst these people. All these three people came from different powers in the 10 great immortal sects, and they respectively stood at different positions. Moreover, they were surrounded by the experts of the power they came from, causing them to seem extremely striking like brilliant moons that were surrounded by a host of stars. Moreover, Xianxia even noticed the figure of Xianxia at the side of the Heart Control Sword House when Tao ran with a single glance. This disciple from the Xiang clan could be considered to be lucky. During the time they were at the primeval battlefield, he was saved by an earthly immortal realm expert, and if it wasn't for that, he'd have died at Xianxia's hand since a long time ago. Besides the three immortal sects represented by Taoist Crimson Sun, Leng Chaner, and when Tao ran, there were some other experts from the devil sects and clans from the primordial era. All of them formed their own circles respectively, and they faintly formed the situation where the immortal sects, devil sects, and primordial clans rivaled each other. Such a scene was actually shockingly similar to the distribution of powers in the Dark Reverie. No matter if it was the 10 great immortal sects, the 6 lineages of the devil sect, or the primordial clans, all three of these powers were in confrontation with each other from afar and formed a triangle of confrontation. All of them more or less had conflict and competition with each other. Someone has already entered the divine palace of creation. You have to make the best use of your time because there's only a single day remaining until the door of profundity opens. The tiny cauldron reminded abruptly. It wouldn't be those xeno-race experts that have entered, right? Xianxia's heart shook as he withdrew his gaze that was sizing up the situation in the surrounding. At this moment, he hadn't approached the divine palace of creation, and he'd restrained his aura while hiding in the extremely distant shadows. It might be. In short, you have to get ready beforehand because the door to the palace will open again in the time for an incense stick to burn. You must grab this opportunity, otherwise the next time it opens will be 7 days from now, and everything would be too late then, replied the tiny cauldron. Senior, don't worry. No matter what, I'll help you obtain that chaotic divine crystal. Xianxia took a deep breath and revealed a firm expression. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a flowing ray of light that approached the front of the palace. With his current strength, he naturally wouldn't be afraid of anyone present here. Swoosh! A streak tore through the sky and drew the attention of numerous gazes before the hall. Xianxia, how could it be you? Leng Chaner was surprised. Her features were like a painting. Her beautiful hair hung loosely like a waterfall, causing her to be charming and sweet like a rose in full blood, graceful and gorgeous. What, could it be that I can't come here? Xianxia glanced at Leng Chaner and replied with a question. As he spoke, he'd already descended before the palace and stood there alone, causing him to seem lonely, and he formed a sharp contrast with the experts from the other powers. Leng Chaner was stunned, and then she said with a smile, I was just slightly surprised. Xianxia glanced at her deeply yet didn't expose her. He'd already confirmed one thing through Leng Chaner's reaction. She surely knew of the matter of Yan Shursan plotting against him. Otherwise she wouldn't feel so surprised upon seeing him making an appearance. He's Xianxia. At the other side, a clear voice suddenly sounded out. Xianxia raised his eyes and looked over. He saw that the person who spoke had eyes that were brilliant like the stars, a face that was white like jade, a high nose, and emitted a vast imposing aura that towered into the sky, and it caused him to seem like a king that had descended here. This person was the peerless sword cultivator from the Heart Control Sword House, Wen Daoran. Exactly. It's precisely this detestable villain that brutally killed the disciples of my Shang clan, and even the young Master Shang Kuan perished at his hand in the primeval battlefield. At Wen Daoran's side, Shang Ke gnashed his teeth while his eyes were filled with resentment. Senior Brother 1. My young Master Shang Kuan is the nephew ancestor Zi Ming dotes upon the most. You must take revenge for him. Anyone could perceive the resentment within Shang Ke's tone. Most of the people present didn't know who exactly Xianxia was, and they couldn't help but be surprised and glance towards the young man that had just arrived when they heard this. I owe a great favor to martial uncle Zi Ming. Since his nephew was bullied to death, then I as a junior am naturally duty-bound. As when Daeron's eyes opened and closed, the phenomenon of a myriad of swords surging about appeared within them, and his entire body seemed like a sharp sword that had been thoroughly tempered and carried an oppressive fierceness. In the next moment, his gaze had already locked onto Xianxia as he said coldly and indifferently, "No matter who you are, since you've offended a member of my Heart Control Sword House, then you must atone for your crimes with death. I'll give you a chance. Kneel down and receive death, and I'll allow you to die slightly more swiftly." His voice was like icy and carried ghastly and oppressive killing intent that caused everyone present to be unable to help but be astounded. Wen Daoran deserves to be a peerless sword cultivator from the Heart Control Sword House. He's like a sword, fierce and overbearing, and he utterly doesn't give others any chances. Lung Chana revealed a slightly strange expression. She'd once seen Xianxia display his overwhelming martial prowess and thrash numerous experts in the highest floor of the Ice Cloud Pavilion. He even dared to bash members of the Violet Thistle Mountains by clan, and his strength was absolutely at the top ranks amongst those of the same generation. When Daoran actually directly asked such a figure to kneel down and receive death, and it caused even her to feel that it was too overbearing and even beyond arrogant. Kneel down and receive death? Wouldn't that be going too easy on this kid? With Wen Daoran's powerful support, Shang Ke's spirits were greatly refreshed, and he stared complacently and resentfully at Xianxia as he gritted his teeth and said, "I suggest that this kid ought to be sliced into pieces before extracting his soul and sealing it within purgatory, so that he will suffer the torment of flames and be unable to be reborn for eternity." Everyone was stunned as they felt this fellow was too atrocious. Even those experts from the devil sex were surprised as they never expected that this kid from the Heart Control Sword House was actually so ruthless, because such brutal methods were simply 100 or 1,000 times crueler than killing a person. When Daoran frowned as well when he heard this, but he nodded in the end. "So long as he receives death obediently, then I'll leave it at that. But if he dares to go against my words, then we'll do as you said." From the beginning until the end, both of them hadn't taken Xianxia seriously as they spoke, and the supreme feeling of arrogance came natural to them. They had a feeling of superiority as if life and death was both controlled within the palm of their hands, and they seemed like they were dealing with an ant that was at their mercy, so relaxed and at ease. During this entire process, Xianxia had always been looking at them quietly with a calm expression, and when Daoran finished speaking, he suddenly started laughing, yet his laughter was icy cold to the extreme. Kid, you actually still dare to laugh? You're courting death." Shang Ke was stunned and shouted explosively, "Bang!" His voice stopped abruptly as if he was a duck that had its neck choked. He was confined by a shapeless and formidable force field that caused a bang sound to resound out as his entire body was directly struck to the point his legs broke, and he knelt down on the ground. This kid isn't simple. The hearts of everyone present here shook as they felt a terrifying force field gush out from Xianxia, and it was like a shocking dragon that left its lair, filled with an icy cold and emotionless aura of confinement. Lung Chana was stunned as she deeply perceived that Xianxia at this moment was even more terrifying than when she saw him at the highest floor of the Ice Cloud Pavilion, and he seemed to have been reborn and become a completely different person. Never had Shang Ke imagined that Xianxia hadn't knelt yet, but he'd already knelt first instead. The violent pain in his entire body coupled with his violent fury that struck his heart caused him to instantly spray out a mouthful of blood, and he was angered to the point his face warped. He intended to stand up, yet felt the space around his body had been confined, causing him to feel as if an enormous mountain was pressing down on him. Not to mention standing up, there wasn't even room to struggle, and this caused him to be both shocked and furious as he spat blood repeatedly. You? When Daoran had never imagined that she would actually be so resolute, ruthless, and decisive in making a move, and would suppress Xianxia right before his eyes. This was simply an undisguised slap to the face. If I don't capture and kill this kid, then my face is completely lost today. Explode! However, before he could make a move, the nearby she spoke once more, and he spat out a word that seemed like a thunderclap that emanated a horrifying force as it resounded out in the eardrums of everyone. Rumble! A rain of blood sprayed out, under the gazes of everyone present. Xianxia, who knelt on the ground, seemed as if he was fiercely torn apart by a ferocious beast from the primeval times, and he instantly exploded into a ball of bloody rain that sprayed down to the surroundings. The scene of his death was exceedingly miserable and horrifying, and it was simply no different to being executed by dismemberment. Courting death! You're courting death! When Daoran shouted explosively, and his expression was gloomy to the extreme. His entire body glowed as peerlessly fierce and dense sword insight surged out from his body like a circulating tide, and he simply seemed like a peerless treasure sword that had been unsheathed and intended to destroy everything. This caused everyone to feel apprehensive in their hearts, and they dodged towards the distance as they were deeply afraid of being affected. Xi's expression remained unchanged instead, and he was calm and unhurried. Even though when Daoran was strong, his imposing aura was obviously slightly inferior to Xianxia. So she was naturally unafraid. Rumble! However, right when the battle between the two would be triggered at any moment. Suddenly, an enormous bang that shook the heavens and the earth resounded out, and the door to the divine palace of creation had actually opened. It finally opened up. Everyone exclaimed with surprise and completely moved their attention from Xianxia and Wen Daoran to the inside of the mysterious palace. The entrance that seemed to be constructed from ancient wood opened up abruptly and emanated a dazzling glow that was extremely brilliant. Auspicious chi curled up from within while numerous rays of divine light penetrated out from within, and it emitted a wave of the sounds of worship. At this moment, it seemed as if they'd returned to the primeval times. The gods were chanting, causing the tune of the gods to enter the ear, and the mysterious aura of the Grand Tao was dense and was emitted from space itself. The door of the divine palace of creation had opened up completely. Multicolored lights flowed within it and drew the minds of all, and they couldn't restrain themselves any longer and charged over in unison. They'd already been waiting here for a long time, and they knew that after the door to the divine palace opened, it would close once more in a short moment. So how could they dare hesitate? Xianxia and Wen Daoran had split up as well. Even though Wen Daoran hated Xianxia to death, at this moment, nothing could be more attractive than the palace left behind by an exalted expert. He was yearned extremely for the supreme inheritance within the palace and was determined to obtain it. Compared to this, the death of Xianxia wasn't anything important, and it wouldn't be too late to annihilate Xianxia after he entered the palace. Kid, I'll let you live for a short moment more, and I'll personally take your life later. When Daoran glanced coldly at Xianxia before transforming into a wisp of flowing light that swiftly charged into the palace. Conceited. Xianxia shook his head before flashing into the palace as well. Rumble. When everyone had just entered the divine palace of creation, the door of the palace closed tightly once more. My God! What a large pool of immortal liquid! This was a vast and grand hall. Its air was enshrouded with dense spirit energy that assaulted the nose, whereas there was shockingly a pool at the center of the hall. When everyone entered, they instantly noticed that the pool actually contained immortal liquid. The golden and brilliant immortal liquid effused a refreshing fragrance. It was dense and bright like sap that had turned gold, and it gurgled and roiled while surging with strands of the aura of the Grand Tao, causing it to seem as if one could ascend to become an immortal by drinking a single gulp. Swish! Various magic treasures flew out as everyone made a move at the first possible moment, and they rushed to be the first to collect the immortal liquid. This was true liquid immortal energy, and just a single drop was much more valuable than an immortal stone. It was extremely rare and exceedingly precious. Merely this pool of immortal liquid would be sufficient to be exchanged for a true immortal artifact in the outside world. This was the reserves and resources of the divine palace of creation. It was absolutely not something a secret realm could compare to, and the things contained within it were naturally shocking to the extreme and carried unimaginable worth. Xianxia made a move as well, and he executed the stellar lightning form's grand Tao of Devourer as he grabbed out like a rock swallowing the ocean, causing him to directly seize away more than half of the immortal liquid that weighed an entire 5,000 kilograms from the pool. This instantly provoked the displeasure of the others. Your avarice knows no bounds. Hand it over. Some people couldn't refrain from making a move against Xianxia with the intention of killing him and seizing the immortal liquid for himself. Fuck off! Xianxia shouted coldly with a surging voice as Tao insights rumbled throughout his body and transformed into divine rings that coiled around him. And it seemed like numerous suns were enveloped around him as they resisted the attacks of these people. After that, Xianxia took a step forward. Rumble! He blasted flying those people that made a move against him, causing them to cough up blood without end, and they looked at Xianxia as if they were looking at a freak while their gazes were filled with terror. Who could have imagined that this fellow who just arrived would actually be so formidable? At this moment, no matter if it was the experts of the Immortal Sect, Devil Sects, or Primordial Clans, all of them had realized how extraordinary Xianxia's strength was once more. All of them revealed slight, fearful expressions, and no one came to cause trouble for him anymore. Most importantly, this place was the divine palace of creation, and it contained too many unknown treasures. If they were to cause trouble for Xianxia at this moment, it would be rather unwise, because what if someone were to seize this opportunity and beat them to a treasure? Then it would be too late to regret it. In next to no time, the pool of immortal liquid was completely divided up, and the aggressive atmosphere eased up greatly along with this. After they sized up the surroundings briefly, everyone noticed that there was actually a myriad of doors in the surroundings of the hall, and they were like the entrances to numerous mazes, causing one to be dazed by the sight of them and not know which door to enter. So many doors. I wonder which door leads to the place of inheritance of that exalted expert from the primeval times. Someone frowned and felt slightly at a loss for what to do. What's so difficult about this? Haven't our ancestors entered a long time ago? We only have to sense carefully, and we'll surely be able to sense the trace of aura left behind by them. Someone muttered in a soft voice. Ancestors? Xianxia raised his eyes and looked over. He saw that the person who spoke earlier was a disciple of the Truth Embrace sect that followed by Taoist Crimson Sunside. Moreover, he noticed that after the members of the other powers heard this, most of their expressions remained unchanged, as if they knew about this since a long time ago. Could it be that these powers were led by earthly immortal realm experts, and they'd entered the divine palace of creation beforehand? Xianxia frowned, and he felt his guess wasn't far from the truth. Looks like the news from before about earthly immortal realm experts wouldn't be joining in clearly can't be believed completely. This discovery caused Xianxia's heart to constrict. If it was true, then earthly immortal realm experts would be added to the ranks of the opponents he was competing with, and just thinking about it caused him to have a headache. Actually, it was obvious just from thinking about it. When facing with such a treasure trove that only emerged once in a very long time, even heavenly immortals would probably be moved, let alone earthly immortal realm experts. Let's go! Suddenly, a wisp of excitement suffused the corners of Lung Channer's mouth as she seemed to have sensed something, and then all the experts of the Heaven Flow Tao sect instantly flashed directly towards one of the doors. Moreover, at this moment, the members of the other powers acted in this way as well. Group after group left swiftly and headed towards different doors, and they'd vanished in an instant. In the time of a few breaths, only Xianxia remained in the entire hall. The divine palace of creation. Only Xianxia remained within the empty hall, yet he wasn't anxious and looked at his surroundings. He looked at the myriad of doors in his surroundings for a good while before he asked, "Senior, which door do you think I should choose?" After staying silent for a short while, the tiny cauldron didn't answer him but asked another question in reply. "Do you know how many cultivators have come here since the primeval times until now?" Xianxia was stunned and didn't know how to answer this. The primeval times were too far away after all, and it was far to the point of seeming like a legend. According to legend, it was a period of time where the chaos had just been split apart and the three dimensions had just been established, and it was a desolate and chaotic scene. At that time, everything in the world was born with intelligence. Fiend gods roamed freely while the saints fought for supremacy, and they created numerous myths that shook the heavens and the earth. Numerous supreme and almighty figures of the three dimensions were born during that period of time. The dark parasol's abyss was precisely formed from a divine tree in the primeval times that linked up the immortal dimension and the mortal dimension, and it was already a matter of countless years ago. No one was able to be sure exactly how many living beings had stepped foot within it in the innumerable years of the past. Actually, there are very few because since the primeval times until now, the dark parasol's abyss has only appeared 3 times. The first time it appeared was during the primeval times. At that time, a calamity of divine punishment that affected the 3 dimensions had erupted, causing the 3 dimensions to fall into great chaos, and the gods perished and the saints fell. The second time it appeared just happened to be when the calamity of the fiend gods descended. At that time, all the fiend gods that roamed freely throughout the ages and looked down upon the world suffered calamity, and they were completely obliterated in the annals of history. After that time, a true descendant of the fiend gods couldn't be found any longer in the entire world. That period of time was called the primordial era, and it's 1,000,000 years from the primeval times. The third time it appeared was 10,000 years ago, but it only appeared for a short moment of less than 6 hours before strangely vanishing, and it actually caused everyone to be unable to enter it. According to rumor, a great figure that had ascended to the end of the path of the Tao had descended here, and he personally sealed up the dark parasol's abyss. Now, it's the 4th time the dark parasol's abyss appeared. The tiny cauldron's voice was flat and emotionless, as if it was narrating an unimportant and trivial matter, and it rose slowly within Xianxia's heart before curling up and dispersing. However, when these words entered into Xianxia's ears, they weren't inferior to a thunderclap, and they caused his mind to shake before a tempestuous storm arose within it. He was unable to calm down his feelings for a long time. The first time the dark parasol's abyss appeared, a calamity of divine punishment descended onto the 3 dimensions, causing the gods to perish and the saints to fall. The second time it appeared, the calamity of the fiend gods descended to the 3 dimensions, and the peerlessly formidable fiend god clan were henceforth obliterated from the annals of time. The third time it appeared, even though it didn't draw down a great calamity, yet a great figure had descended and sealed it up. Yet now it was the 4th time the dark parasol's abyss appeared. What does this mean? It wouldn't be that it's related to the upheaval of the 3 dimensions, right? When he thought up to here, even with Xianxia's level of composure, he couldn't help but gasp and feel his scalp go slightly numb. The first 2 times caused the gods to perish, saints to fall, and the fiend god clan to be obliterated. Then what about this time? What sort of terrifying, unexpected event would occur? Xianxia didn't dare imagine any further. Even existences with ability that reached the heavens like the gods, saints, and fiend gods were unable to avoid the successive calamities that struck the 3 dimensions, let alone the myriad of living beings in the 3 dimensions. Why do I feel that the dark parasol's abyss is like the source of calamity, and every time it appears, it's accompanied by an upheaval of the 3 dimensions? Is it too unbelievable? Xianxia muttered. This sort of thing seemed to be extremely far away from him, yet when it really occurred, who could guarantee that he wouldn't be affected? But after that, he suddenly realized something. At this moment, he was only a step away from the door of profundity, so why did the tiny cauldron suddenly tell him something like this? Once the time comes, you'll naturally understand. The tiny cauldron seemed to have seen through Xianxia's thoughts, and it said something that was extremely strange. Because you're different from others. These words seemed to be very normal, yet when they were spoken by the tiny cauldron, caused Xianxia to have the feeling that it was slightly unusual. This was an indescribable feeling that he felt was impossible to explain. He really wanted to ask which part of him was different than others, but he forcefully restrained himself in the end. He knew that if the tiny cauldron wasn't willing, then even if he continued asking, he would probably not get any answers. The dark parasol's abyss, the great chaos of the three dimensions, saying that I'm different from others for no reason or rhyme, is truly difficult to comprehend. Xianxia sighed lightly in his heart. Let's go. With the protection of the dark parasol sapling, you can casually select any one of these doors to enter, and if you go forward continuously, you'll be able to arrive at the core area of the divine palace of creation. The tiny cauldron guided. As for the so-called inheritance of the exalted expert, I'm unable to guide you towards that. After all, I'm only able to sense the existence of the chaotic divine crystal. Xianxia took a deep breath and exerted great effort to completely recover his senses before he nodded and casually chose one of the doors, and then he flashed towards it. At the instant he entered the door, an extremely deep and quiet passageway that was suffused with the aura of chaos entered into his vision, causing it to seem mysterious to the extreme, and it was unknown how much danger and malevolence was concealed within it. Woo, woo, woo. When Xianxia had just taken a step forward, the deep and quiet passageway suddenly started revolving as countless blade vortexes flew out of thin air, and they shot out explosively while the image of some ghastly beings was formed amongst them. These images roared ferociously and emitted an oppressive force that felt like a mountain pressing down. Rumble. Xianxia didn't even spare it a glance as he circulated his black hole world and caused the aura of the dark parasol divine tree to surge out before he started moving forward all along the way. A shocking scene appeared. Those blade vortexes and images of ghastly beings seemed as if they encountered the arrival of an emperor, and they moved aside successively before dispersing into nothingness. It was even to the extent that the aura of chaos that coiled around the passageway was dispersed completely, causing his field of vision to instantly open up. Only now did Xianxia notice that the walls of the passageway were actually constructed completely out of the essence of the five elements mixed with various types of strange divine rocks, and they were densely covered with countless restrictions. Even the ground was paved with various natural treasures of the heavens and the earth that were branded with mysterious restrictions, and they emanated horrifying auras. Let me see if the materials of this passageway can be gathered. Xianxia held the bloody sword of the Yazi clan and executed his supreme sword Dao as he slashed down. Bang! Sparks flew out in all directions. The walls of the passageway actually didn't move in the slightest and didn't react at all from being slashed by Xianxia's sword. It was utterly impossible to be gathered. Xianxia's heart shook. Even a quasi-immortal artifact's body would probably be unable to avoid being damaged by a sword strike of mine. Could it be that the walls of this passageway are even more solid than a quasi-immortal artifact? After that, he came to an understanding. Since the ancient times until now, there were numerous great figures that had entered this place. If it was so easy to be gathered, then it would have been plundered completely innumerable years ago. Xianxia didn't dally and executed the wings of disruption as he flashed towards the depths of the passageway. This passageway was really filled with danger and killing intent with every step. Along with him going deeper into the passageway, he'd seen countless dangerous killing moves. Some were similarly to grand formations of annihilation, and they were capable of condensing ferocious spirits that were extremely vicious and possessed formidable strength to cover the passageway. Every single one of these ferocious spirits weren't inferior to a peak nether transformation realm expert, causing them to be terrifying. It was even to the extent that Xianxia had seen some strange armored puppets. They wore bronze armor, were covered in iron spikes, and were ferocious and savage. Moreover, they held various formidable weapons like blades, hooks, tridents, axes, battle axes, and so on and so forth. Most astounding of it all was that these iron-armored puppets had talisman markings that contained the power of a curse inscribed on them, and it was evil, overbearing all over the puppets, and exceedingly formidable. Besides those ferocious spirits that very exceedingly vicious and the brutal and formidable iron-armored puppets, there were numerous other terrifying sources of killing intent. Wave after wave filled the surroundings of this passageway, and it simply seemed endless. If it wasn't for the assistance of the dark parasol sapling, even Xianxia didn't dare be sure that he would be able to traverse this exceedingly dangerous passageway by relying on his current cultivation. On the way, Xianxia saw numerous skeletons. Some seemed to have shattered from suffering a terrifying heavy blow. Some seemed to have become pitch black from being corroded by toxic poison. The The states of their deaths came in an infinite variety, and some have already transformed into a pile of bone ash since a long time ago. Obviously, these skeletons ought to have existed for a very long time, and they might have perished when the Dark Parasol's abyss appeared the last time. I wonder if so many dangers exist within the doors the others chose? She suddenly recalled Taoist Crimson Sun, Lung Chaner, Wen Daoran, and the others. You're courting death. This abode was discovered by my Zhuyan clan first. The treasures within it naturally ought to belong to us. Humph. That would depend on if all of you have the ability to seize it all. Despicable. You dare call my white-bone devil sect despicable? Kill all of them. Right when she was pondering, the sound of violent battle suddenly sounded out from the depths of the passageway, and there were explosive shouts that frequently sounded out from there as they seemed to be arguing about something. The Zhuyan clan? The white-bone devil sect? Aren't these two of the powers that entered the divine palace along with me? Why have they appeared here? She was surprised. He clearly remembered that these two powers had chosen different doors. Moreover, the door he chose was different as well. Yet now all of them had actually gathered together. Could it be that the passageways within these doors are interconnected? She pondered for a short moment before he flashed out while restraining his aura, and he approached without emitting a single sound. This was a rather magnificent hall that was filled with brilliant light and flowing with the aura of treasures, while immortal energy that was dense to the point of being on the verge of transforming into liquid suffused the entire surroundings. But the hall was completely empty and only a stone table lay at the center. On the table was some jade pots and jade cups that flowed with divine light, and it was obvious with a single glance that they weren't ordinary. At this moment, there were over 10 figures in battle within the hall, causing Tao arts to soar about while streaks shot out violently, and all of them were fighting to seize the jade pots and jade cups on the stone table. The situation of the battle of violent to the extreme, and they were obviously fighting with their lives on the line. When Xianxia arrived here, his spirits couldn't help but be refreshed as a wisp of a burning gaze suffused his eyes. The jade pots and jade cups on the stone table seemed as if they were carved out of jade, glowed like treasures, and a rain of light actually sprinkled down in their surroundings, causing them to seem extremely miraculous. There was even an intoxicating fragrance of wine suffused in the air, and just a whiff of it caused the blood in Xianxia's entire body to surge while his soul felt light, and he seemed to be intoxicated by it. A treasure. Could it be that the jade pots contained divine wine brewed by an immortal? She instantly understood that even though the jade pots and jade cups were rare and precious, but if it was in terms of value, then they were absolutely unable compared to the divine treasure that seemed to have been brewed by an immortal contained within them. This was the divine palace of creation, one of the 3 most mysterious places of treasure in the entire Dark Parasol's abyss. According to rumor, the inheritance of an exalted expert from the primeval times was hidden here. Since those jade pots and jade cups could appear here, how could they be ordinary? It was extremely likely that it was the divine wine brewed by immortals that the exalted expert drank. Just think about, at that sort of cultivation realm, what sort of treasure would one be unable to obtain? The things utilized to brew wine might even be top precious and divine medicine in the world, and there might even be some miraculous things from the 3 dimensions blended into the wine. After all, the owner of this place was an exalted figure during the primeval times that could compare to the Dark Parasol divine tree, and it was a true almighty figure that surpassed everything mortal. No matter if it was the utensils he possessed or the wine he drank, they would absolutely exceed the imagination of everyone in the world. Bang! The Tao arts of over 10 experts collided together, and it enveloped the hall in a boundless expanse of blazing light. Magic treasures fluttered about as rays of light rumbled. The white-bone devil sex experts and the experts of the Zhuyan clan fought violently and battled horrifyingly, and they fought with all their might for the sake of seizing the divine items on the stone table. Fortunately, this was the depths of the divine hall of creation, and it was covered in dense restrictions that protected this territory, causing it to remain eternal and impregnable like a fortress. Otherwise, if it was any other place, it would have probably been blasted into ruins. Humph! What treasure is that? What shocking immortal energy! Those jade pots surely contain precious treasures of the heavens and the earth that are rare to come by throughout the ages. Let's join forces and seize possession of it. Charge! A wave of the sound of the air being torn apart resounded out as even more people noticed the situation here and swarmed over, and then they waved their magic treasures about as they joined into the battle, causing its scale to become even more terrifying. Xianxia, who hid in the shadows, noticed that there seemed to be more than one path that left to this hall, and at the other directions that were exceedingly deep and hidden were numerous other passageways that led here. For example, the group of people that charged over now had flashed out from another passageway. "All of you move aside!" A loud shout that shook the heavens resounded out. Taoist Crimson Sun's hair fluttered as he charged into the battlefield, and then he flicked his Taoist robe. Rumble! A violet ray of light towered into the sky like a surge of lightning, and it blasted the crowd apart. Moreover, there were even a few people amongst them that had collided with the stone wall and died on the spot. He walked into the hall with large strides, a gaze that was like a bolt of lightning, and an imposing aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas. He possessed peerless divine might as he struck out repeatedly, and people were ceaselessly blasted flying by him before fainting. This caused everyone to be astounded, and they didn't dare believe that the extraordinary disciple of one of the 10 great immortal sects, the Truth Embrace sect, would actually possess such a peerlessly formidable strength. And he was simply like a shocking dragon that had emerged from the sea and arrived overbearingly in the world of men. This is probably 7 times his combat strength. Someone cried out loudly with a voice filled with shock. An existence of this level could practically sweep through those of the same generation. So long as one emerged, the person would be like the sun and moon in the sky, emitting a brilliant glow, and no one would dare rashly go against the person. Xianxia was extremely shocked in his heart as well. This Taoist Crimson Sun's cultivation seemed to be on par with Xianxia, and he's a peerless genius as well. Nice work, senior brother Crimson Sun. Some disciples from the Truth Embrace sect cheered and seemed to have already taken the things on the stone table to be something they would obtain for sure. Bang! 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 Some were disgruntled and blocked before the stone table, yet were repeatedly crushed by Taoist Crimson Sun before being blasted flying. All of them were either heavily injured or died miserably, and his all-powerful imposing aura could really be said to be horrifying and ever triumphant. How bustling! Looks like it's surely a rare precious treasure. If it was really left behind by that exalted expert from the primeval times, then it would really be heaven-defying. Let me have a look. Right at this moment, a golden sword appeared while its peerless and ghastly sword insight caused the hall to rise and fall like an ocean, and the glow of the sword was like a wave that drowned the entire hall. The expressions of everyone revealed shock. The sword insight of the person that had arrived penetrated through the sky and was peerlessly sharp, whereas his gaze was like cold lightning as it swept past everyone, and he was like a peerless sword cultivator that was looking down upon all. It was precisely the extraordinary disciple of the Heart Control Sword House, Wen Daoran. It was common knowledge how overbearing and terrifying he was. He was like his sword, overbearing and fierce, and he was an extraordinary genius figure. Swoosh! The golden sword soared through the sky while surging with sword insight, and it stretched out like an all-powerful wave that directly shook the numerous experts to the point of being forced back and falling to extremely sorry states. This sword insight was too terrifying and was simply capable of shaking the Milky Way and shattering the sky, and it was peerlessly overbearing. A group of people stood out in unison yet were unable to obstruct it, and they were struck to the point of dispersing instead. When Daoran walked over with large strides as he looked arrogantly at everyone, and then he stretched out his hand and grabbed towards the stone table. "Want the treasure? Have you asked my permission?" Taoist Crimson Sun grunted coldly as he flicked his sleeve, causing an expanse of brilliant divine light to surge out like a river of stars, and it struck towards Wen Daoran. "Ha ha ha! I heard since a long time ago that you, Taoist Crimson Sun, are a rare, extraordinary genius of the Truth Embrace sect. Let me see if you're worthy of your name." Wen Daoran roared with laughter as his dense hair fluttered about. He seemed awe-inspiring as he slashed down with his sword, and it carried monstrous might capable of overturning yin and yang and throwing the world into chaos. It instantly dispersed all the attacks of his opponent. Moreover, the peerless sword Qi shook the surroundings like the eye of a storm, and it enveloped Taoist Crimson Sun within it. This move of the sword simply possessed the might to annihilate the heavens and the earth, and it was an ultimate sword technique of the Heart Control Swordhouse World Disorder Sword. Once it was executed, the sword move was like a raging storm that caused others to have a disorderly and overturned feeling. The Heart Control Swordhouse. Before one controlled the sword, one had to first control the heart. The direction of the heart is where the edge of the blade would be, and only then would it be capable of tearing through anything. This World Disorder Sword required the heart of its user to be like ice and without ripples like the bottom of an old well. But when it descended into the eyes of the enemy, it was complicated, confusing, strange, and unusual, causing one to have nowhere to attack and no place to resist. World Disorder Sword? Humph. Try my Truth Embrace Sex Dragon Tiger Azure Energy Slash. Taoist Crimson Sun grunted coldly as an iron rules-shaped magic treasure that was 0.6 m long, for fingers wide, completely pitch black like ink, and suffused with a dim and cold sheen appeared in his hand before he slashed out. My body remains firm and so does my mind. Azure Energy Extreme Technique. Dragon and Tiger live as one. Bang! Azure Energy surged and developed into the form of a dragon and tiger, and they whistled out like shooting stars with a powerful and heavy might. They utterly disregarded the disorderly sword lights and surged directly at Wen Daoran, and it was straightforward and peerlessly ferocious. Both of them entered into an intense battle, and they seemed like two blazing suns colliding and battling in midair while erupting with brilliant light and peerless divine might that enveloped the entire hall. Moreover, their imposing auras were terrifying to the extreme. At the side, many people were shaken to the point they emitted muffled groans and retreated back while blood flowed out of the corners of their mouths. Some people were even blasted directly out of the hall, and it shocked everyone to the point they retreated once more before resisting it with all their might. Some bold people wanted to seize this opportunity to take away the divine items of the stone table, yet the outcome was that those people were shattered apart and mangled by the aftershock of the intense battle between the two of them. This caused everyone to be horrified and not dare make any more rash moves. All of them knew extremely clearly that unless the battle between the two of them ended, otherwise, forcefully traversing the area would mostly cost them their lives. Swoosh! However, right when everyone was dodging and didn't dare to move forward, suddenly, a flowing ray of light charged out like a sharp awl, and it forcefully tore into the battlefield and arrived before the stone table at the center in the blink of an eye. From the beginning until the end, this ray of light wasn't injured in the slightest. Who's this person? He actually dared to openly appear there and intends to seize that divine items under the gazes of everyone present. Could it be that he isn't afraid of suffering the revenge of those two experts? Everyone was stunned and slightly didn't dare believe their eyes. Xianxia, it's you again. I haven't got even with you for killing my junior brother Xianxia. Yet you actually dare to seize my treasure now? You're simply courting death. Let go. When Daoran roared furiously when he saw Xianxia stretching out his hand to sweep away all the jade pots and jade cups on the stone table, and it angered him to the point his eyes almost split open. Xianxia, out of consideration for your senior brother Long Jinbei, swiftly leave the treasures, otherwise, I'll kill without mercy. Taoist Crimson Sun's expression sank as he berated with an icy cold voice. Both of them stopped fighting at practically the exact same moment, and they struck out at Xianxia amidst their furious roars. They seemed as if Xianxia was a mortal enemy of theirs, and they transformed into companions that fought side by side. Because both of them knew very clearly that if Xianxia was allowed to carry off the treasures, then their battle would be utterly meaningless, and only by killing Xianxia would they be able to be at ease. Rumble. Both of them attacked hatefully, and the impetus of their strike was simply terrifying to the extreme. It was like two scorching suns smashing down, and merely the copious and ferocious imposing aura emitted from them caused numerous experts to be forced back. This fellow is probably finished. The pupils of everyone constricted as the joint forces of Wen Daoran and Taoist Crimson Sun was too terrifying. Even though they hadn't participated in the battle, their entire bodies still felt cold, as if they'd fallen into a pit of ice. The treasures of the heavens and the earth belong to those who are fated. Who set out that these belong to the both of you? It's simply laughable. She swiftly turned his head around as his gaze was like a cold bolt of lightning. Talisman markings surged as he moved through the sky like a dragon while his entire body was coiled with blazing rays of light, and he slapped out with his palm. Rumble. At this instant, space seemed to have been crushed apart by an enormous force, and it emitted a deafening and sharp sound of sonic booms. When looked at from afar, she seemed to be stepping on stars while his hands pushed the sun and the moon as he moved, and his imposing aura was vast to the extreme and practically caused others to feel suffocated. Bang! Bang! It was like an enormous mountain had collided with their bodies. Under the focused gazes of numerous shocked gazes, when Daoran and Taoist Crimson Sun were directly blasted flying, and their figures staggered and almost fell to the ground. You? When Daren's expression changed indeterminately in a violent manner, and he seemed as if he was staring at a freak. You're actually capable of achieving this. Your senior brother Long Jinbei is far inferior to you. Taoist Crimson Sun was astounded as well, and he looked at the handsome young man that stood opposite him as if it was the first time he'd known the young man. On the other hand, the expressions of everyone else in the hall froze, and their eyeballs almost fell out. This is too heaven-defying. He actually blasted both when Daoran and Taoist Crimson Sun flying with a single strike. After all, both of them are peerless geniuses with formidable strengths, and there are very few people amongst those of the same generation that are capable of matching them equally. Looks like my senior brother Yen really lost at your hands. Suddenly, a tender exclaim of shock sounded out from outside the hall, and it revealed shock that couldn't be concealed. Everyone turned around to look, and they saw the Heavenflow Dao Sex Lung Chaner had arrived outside the hall since an unknown moment in time. But when they comprehended the meaning within Lung Chaner's words, everyone present instantly seemed as if they were struck by lightning, and they felt their scalps go numb. Senior brother Yen? Isn't that the most renowned madman of the Heavenflow Dao sect, Yen Shursan? He actually lost at Xianxia's hands? At this moment, even the expressions of when Daoran and Taoist Crimson Sun changed once more, and for the very first time, the gazes they shot at Xianxia revealed a wisp of fear. After all, even if they were to go against Yen Shursan, he would be a formidable foe that was difficult to deal with, and they didn't dare say their victory was assured. Since Xianxia had actually defeated him, so doesn't that mean that Xianxia is even more formidable than Yen Shursan?